Imagine a master blueprint laid out thousands of years ago, and it details the rise and fall of world powers with just uncanny accuracy. What if this blueprint wasn't just some historical record, but a living prophecy, meticulously fulfilled, and pointing to a divine architect and a future global kingdom that, well, lasts forever? In this deep dive, we're going to unpack some ancient prophecies, particularly from the profound book of Daniel. We want to reveal how divine foresight, it seems, meticulously mapped out world history. We'll explore how these prophesied empires, even though they're long gone, they continue to shape our world today. And we'll discover what this divine blueprint says about the ultimate everlasting kingdom that, well, is still to come. Get ready to connect some truly fascinating dots. Okay, let's unpack this incredible ancient text. We're diving into a book that for many is really a cornerstone for understanding not just historical events, but maybe also getting a glimpse into the future. It's quite unique because, well, significant portions of it focus explicitly on the empires of the Gentile world, not solely Israel, which gives us this unparalleled, sweeping view of geopolitical history from, a profoundly different perspective.
It's really fascinating stuff. What gets me here is how this ancient record provides such a sweeping panorama of world history. We're talking hundreds, even thousands of years in advance. It's almost like looking at history through, well, the lens of a divine author. Someone who possesses absolute sovereignty over all nations, all epochs. The precision with which these empires are described, from their defining characteristics to their eventual successors. It just stands as this powerful testament. A testament to a mind that could see the entire tapestry of human history before it even began. It really confirms, for many, its undeniable divine origin.
And this panoramic vision, it really kicks off with a famous, maybe even unsettling dream, right? Picture this. A powerful king, Nebuchadnezzar, absolute ruler of the mighty Babylonian Empire. He has this disturbing dream of a giant, awe-inspiring statue. He's so troubled by it that he demands his wise men not just interpret it, but first tell him what the dream was. That's an impossible test for human wisdom, surely.
Absolutely impossible. And only one man, Daniel, empowered by, as the text says, the God of all creation, could actually do it. And in doing so, he lays out this sequence of empires with just astonishing preordained precision.
So the statue itself, how does Daniel break that down?
Well, the statue, as Daniel interprets it, describes the succession of world powers that would follow Babylon. Each one seems to diminish in perceived glory or material value: gold, then silver, then bronze, then iron, but often increasing in strength or complexity in a way. The first part, the head of gold, that represented the Babylonian Empire itself, the dominant power of Daniel's time. Babylon was renowned for its immense splendor, its vast wealth, its absolute monarchical rule. You think of the Hanging Gardens, the magnificent walls.
Its sheer opulence.
Exactly. Its opulent palaces. It truly was seen as a golden age of empires, pretty much unrivaled in its glory and influence, a real beacon of human achievement and power back then.
And then you mentioned a shift in material signifying a new power, but one that's somehow less magnificent yet still incredibly powerful.
Precisely. The chest and arms of silver signified the Medo-Persian Empire. This kingdom, it was a dual power, Media and Persia together. They conquered Babylon in 539 BC, which, is recorded by historians like Herodotus. Now, while it was incredibly vast and militarily formidable, stretching all the way from India to Ethiopia, silver is, well, inherently less valuable than gold.
Okay, so a symbolic step down in glory.
Yeah, it subtly suggested it was inferior in glory, perhaps due to its more, let's say, bureaucratic and decentralized administration compared to Babylon's more opulent and absolute rule. And its dual nature, reflected in the two arms, also highlighted the eventual dominance of Persia over Media within that alliance. That's a nuance remarkably captured in the symbolism.
And after the silver, the dream transitions again, this time to an empire of bronze, indicating another distinct and powerful shift.
Yes, the belly and thighs of bronze represented the Greek Empire. This points specifically to Alexander the Great's lightning-fast military campaigns and his unparalleled strength. Bronze, while less precious than silver, was known for its utility in warfare. You think of the Greek hoplite armies and their bronze armor. Alexander's conquests were incredibly swift, covering vast distances in a really short time, and culturally transformative too, spreading Hellenistic influence across the known world.
His military genius was legendary.
Truly, and the speed of his expansion was a marvel for their time. It makes the leopard symbol, which we'll probably get into later, a really apt symbol for this bronze empire.
So we move from the splendor of gold to the strength of silver, and now the utility of bronze, each indicating a distinct unfolding power in history. What came next in this metallic progression? The one that really left an indelible mark on the world.
Right. Following the Greek Empire came the legs of iron. This vividly depicts the strength, the durability, and the sheer crushing power of the Roman Empire. Iron, while not precious like gold or silver or bronze, is renowned for its unyielding strength, its ability to break anything in its path. The Roman Empire superseded the Greek Empire, first through conquest, then through absorption, and it was known for its immense military might, its unparalleled ability to expand, conquer, and hold vast territories for centuries.
And its legacy is still with us.
Absolutely. Its enduring legal frameworks, administrative systems, engineering prowess, think of its roads, its aqueducts. It truly stamped the world with its authority, a legacy that definitely still resonates today.
And this incredible dream, it culminates in a truly remarkable and, well, somewhat enigmatic image, doesn't it? The feet. They're a strange mixture.
Yeah, absolutely. The vision concludes with the feet of iron and clay. This symbolizes a divided kingdom, one with inherent weaknesses, a mixture that, can't truly bond. Iron and clay just don't mix well. It suggests a continuation, yes, but also an eventual fragmentation of the Roman Empire's power and influence, leading to an unstable, often brittle nature. And this isn't just about the historical fall of Rome, but maybe its continuation in a fragmented form.
So its influence persists, but in a weakened, divided state.
Exactly. You can see the legacy of this fragmentation even today in the complex geopolitical landscape of what was once the Roman Empire, a mix of diverse nations, cultures, political systems, often existing in tension. It represents a kind of weakened yet still enduring influence of that original iron strength. And this specific part of the prophecy, speaking of a long-lasting yet divided power, is really critical because its implications seem to stretch right into our modern era, hinting at conditions that could persist until the very end.
And this entire sequence, this whole statue from head to toe, it culminates in a truly remarkable image. A final decisive event that almost feels out of place after all that metal.
It really does. The vision concludes with a stone cut without hands that strikes the statue right on its feet of iron and clay. And it utterly destroys it. The stone doesn't just chip away at the statue, it pulverizes it, scatters its remnants like chaff in the wind, leaving, according to the vision, no trace of these human empires behind.
But without hands. That suggests something supernatural, not man-made.
Precisely. This stone symbolizes God's eternal kingdom, a divine supernatural power, born not of human hands or political maneuvering, that will completely surpass and replace all earthly powers. It reveals the divine hand in history, demonstrating that human empires, no matter how mighty, no matter how long-lasting they seem, are temporary. They're ultimately finite, subject to God's overarching eternal plan. And this ultimate kingdom, unlike any human empire, will never be destroyed. It will endure forever, a testament to its divine origin and power. This is really the ultimate vision of history's endgame here, a powerful statement that God's sovereign rule will prevail, utterly crushing all human systems.
Now, Daniel himself receives a vision that seems to parallel Nebuchadnezzar's dream, but uses different symbols, often more vivid ones. The vision of the beast in Daniel 7. Feels more intense somehow, more wild, describing the same empires, but perhaps from a different angle, maybe focusing more on their character and impact.
Yeah, this vision definitely reinforces the same sequence of empires, but it adds another layer of detail, and it focuses more on their inherent characteristics and their effects on humanity, particularly, the text suggests, on God's people. The first beast, a lion with eagle's wings, clearly represents the Babylonian Empire. The lion symbolizes its raw power, its fierce dominion, its majesty, the king of beasts. The eagle's wings suggest swiftness and conquest, and almost supernatural speed in its expansion.
But there's a change, isn't there? The wings get plucked.
Exactly. The vision also hints at its eventual vulnerability. The wings are plucked off, and it's made to stand like a man, losing its fearsome, beastly nature. It signifies its loss of power and eventual fall, just as history records with its conquest by Persia.
And then the next beast, a bear. Often a symbol of brute force, but with a unique characteristic here.
Yes, a bear raised on one side. This represents the Medo-Persian Empire. The bear itself signifies a powerful, devouring force, known for its destructive strength. But being raised on one side uniquely symbolizes the uneven strength within that alliance. Persia eventually became more dominant than Media, literally rising higher within the partnership, and the three ribs in its mouth. They're often interpreted as the three major conquests or divisions of the Persian Empire, perhaps Babylon, Lydia, and Egypt, showing its predatory nature and its expansionist agenda.
Again, that level of specific detail is striking.
It really is. This portrayal again points to God's precise foresight, depicting the nuanced nature of this historical power, not just its general character.
Okay, so after the bear, a swift, multi-headed creature, a leopard. What does that signify?
The leopard, with 4 wings and 4 heads, this signifies the incredible swiftness and strategic brilliance of the Greek Empire under Alexander the Great. A leopard is already one of the fastest, most cunning predators, but 4 wings, that amplifies its speed exponentially, reflecting Alexander's unprecedented rate of conquest across vast territories.
And the foreheads.
The 4 heads point directly to its subsequent division into 4 parts among his generals after his untimely death in 323 BC. And this was precisely fulfilled in history. You had the Seleucid kingdom ruling Syria and Babylon, the Ptolemaic kingdom in Egypt, the Thracian kingdom covering Asia Minor and Thrace, and the Macedonian kingdom in Greece and Macedonia. I mean, this level of granular detail, foretold centuries in advance, it's truly astounding. It provides powerful evidence, many believe, for the divine authorship of these prophecies.
And from this terrifying final beast, something else emerges that's highly significant, especially when we think about future events. A small yet potent horn.
Indeed. The final beast is described as a terrifying beast with iron teeth and 10 horns. This represents the Roman Empire. Described as exceedingly strong, dreadful, capable of devouring and breaking in pieces, stamping the residue under its feet. Its iron teeth directly echo the iron legs of the statue in Daniel 2, reinforcing that destructive power. The 10 horns are usually understood to signify its later subdivision into many kingdoms, hinting at the fragmentation of its power into successor states, the ones that persist even today in Europe.
And the little horn.
Right. From among these 10 horns, a little horn emerges. Now, while this figure has seen potential historical fulfillments, for instance, some interpretations connect it to Antiochus V's Epiphanes, who we might discuss later. It is often understood in a future context. Many see it as an individual or a force that will rise up and persecute God's people, foreshadowing a future world ruler, an ultimate Antichrist figure, someone who will be a major player in the final days of human history, according to this view. The repeated imagery and the astonishing historical accuracy in these parallel prophecies really underscore not only the certainty but also the undeniable divine origin of these foretellings. It reveals a master planner behind all of human history.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting for me. Many people talk about the period between the Old and New Testaments as the 400 silent years. Because there was no new scriptural revelation during that time. It's often thought of as this pause, this quiet interlude in God's interaction with humanity, like nothing significant was happening. But the sources we're looking at reveal that God was anything but silent, it seems. He was orchestrating monumental shifts on the global stage, meticulously preparing the world for, well, the most pivotal event in human history, the coming of the Messiah.
That's exactly right. This period, roughly from 400 BC to maybe 25 AD, it was incredibly dynamic. Far from being an empty space on the timeline, it served as a crucial bridge. A time of intense strategic preparation by God himself. He was meticulously setting the stage for the coming of the Messiah and, importantly, for the rapid, widespread dissemination of his message. And what's truly remarkable is that the precision of the earlier prophecies, those ancient blueprints we just discussed from Daniel, they continue to unfold with breathtaking accuracy during this supposedly silent era.
So God's plan was still actively unfolding, even without new prophets speaking.
Precisely. It proves that God's plan was always in motion, continuously working through the rise and fall of empires, even when human ears weren't hearing new direct prophecies from inspired prophets. It really highlights God's unwavering sovereignty over all of human history.
So how exactly did these ancient prophecies continue to play out during this silent period? How did they demonstrate God's active hand?
Well, the historical events during this time directly fulfilled Daniel's foretellings, proving that the divine blueprint was continuously unfolding with uncanny precision. For instance, the defeat of Persia by Alexander the Great in 331 BC, that's detailed in texts like Daniel 8, where a goat defeats a ram. It was a direct and pretty undeniable fulfillment. And even more precisely, after Alexander's sudden death at a young age, the subsequent division of his Greek Empire into those 4 distinct parts among his generals. That directly corresponded to the prophecy of the broken horn and the 4 kingdoms that would emerge from it.
So not just random history, but predicted outcomes.
Exactly. It wasn't a random historical accident. It was a clear demonstration of God's continuous work through history, validating his foresight even when new prophets weren't speaking.
And these transitions weren't just about empires changing on a map, were they? They had a profound and often tumultuous impact on the Jewish people themselves.
Oh, absolutely. The period saw the very tumultuous transition from Greek, specifically Seleucid rule, to Roman rule over Judea, a time of immense challenge and change for the Jewish people. This transition consistently aligned with Daniel's blueprint as the legs of iron, Rome, replaced the belly and thighs of bronze, Greece. And furthermore, a particularly vivid and distressing fulfillment of prophecy occurred with the infamous desecration of the temple in 167 BC by Antiochus V Epiphanes.
He's often seen as a type of that little horn, right?
Yes, many see him as a historical foreshadowing. His actions, like slaughtering pigs on the altar, erecting an idol to Zeus in the holy place, they precisely foreshadowed the future abomination of desolation mentioned by Jesus in Matthew 24. This historical event, which the Jews bravely resisted in the Maccabean revolt and celebrate today in Hanukkah, serves as a powerful prophetic symbol. A type of what is yet to come, showing God's specific and detailed planning not just for empires, but for the spiritual struggles of his people.
So this implies that these historical struggles, these seemingly random acts of oppression, weren't just chaotic events. They were part of a larger, divinely orchestrated narrative. They had a purpose.
Precisely. The struggles of the Jewish people under foreign powers, like that Maccabean revolt against Seleucid oppression, they exemplified themes of suffering, faithfulness, and eventual deliverance. These events weren't without meaning. They highlighted God's ultimate sovereignty over nations and his unwavering faithfulness to his people, even in their darkest hours. Proving his plan was still meticulously unfolding, and these tumultuous times also served to build and refine the expectation for the coming of the Messiah. For a deliverer who would finally bring lasting peace and establish God's kingdom, the unfolding of these prophecies during the so-called silent years undeniably points to a divine author who is sovereign over all history and who meticulously orchestrates every detail according to his grand, interconnected design, really preparing the world for the most important event yet to come.
It's just astonishing when you look back how God used these monumental global shifts to prepare the world for the arrival of Jesus Christ. It wasn't just about the rise and fall of kingdoms, but specific strategic preparations that actually enabled the rapid spread of the gospel later on. What were some of these key preparations that God seems to have orchestrated?
Well, several key developments occurred that, looking back, really look like deliberate divine interventions, not just mere coincidence. Firstly, Alexander the Great, tutored by the famous philosopher Aristotle, conquered the known world and, crucially, introduced Koine Greek, Common Greek, as the lingua franca of his vast empire. This was incredibly effective. It became a simplified, widely spoken language across diverse cultures and regions, from Egypt all the way to India.
So everyone could basically understand each other.
Yeah, pretty much, at least in trade and administration. And importantly, the translation of the Old Testament into Greek, known as the Septuagint, happened between 285 and 270 BC. That's nearly 3 centuries before Christ's ministry. This made the scriptures accessible to Jews and Gentiles throughout the empire. This universal language was absolutely crucial for the rapid, widespread dissemination of the gospel message later. I mean, just imagine trying to spread a new message across a world with hundreds of different isolated languages without a common tongue. It would have been nearly impossible for the early church.
Okay, so a common language, that's incredibly practical for communication. What else was set in motion during this period that prepared the world?
Secondly, the Maccabean Wars, which we just touched on, led to a brief but significant period of Jewish independence under the Hasmonean dynasty. This period saw the eventual return of many Jewish exiles to Judea. And then the subsequent appointment of Herod the Great as king, though, a controversial figure, often seen as tyrannical, led to the grand rebuilding and transformation of the Jewish temple in Jerusalem. Made it a truly magnificent structure. This reunification and centralized religious hub provided a distinct, identifiable spiritual focal point for the Messiah's arrival, made his appearance and ministry clearly discernible to those who were looking for him, solidifying Jerusalem's unique role in God's plan.
And beyond language and a spiritual center, there was also practical infrastructure that allowed for the rapid movement of people and ideas, wasn't there? The Romans were famous for it.
Yes, exactly. The third major preparation was the Roman road network. The Roman Empire, known for its unparalleled military and governmental might, also revolutionized travel with its extensive road building. By the 1st century, you had over 29 great highways just emerging from Rome alone. Estimates suggest over 370 great roads connecting the vast empire, totaling over 250,000 miles of roadway, with maybe over 80,000 paved miles. These roads were expertly engineered, incredibly durable, built with precise grades, effective drainage, designed for the speed of legions and messengers.
And missionaries, apparently.
And missionaries, exactly. Thanks to this incredible infrastructure, apostles and disciples were able to spread the gospel rapidly across the empire in less than 70 years. Think of Paul's missionary journeys. So many of them were possible because of these Roman roads. These roads, originally built for military and administrative control, became the very arteries through which the message of Christ flowed. It demonstrates God's ingenious use of human endeavors for his profound divine purposes. So all these elements, common language, a centralized spiritual hub, efficient transportation, were meticulously put in place during those silent years, serving as a strategic bridge built by God to prepare the world for his Son and the message he would bring. Truly an orchestrated global stage.
This brings us to what many consider the most startling prophetic passage in the entire ancient text, Daniel chapter 9, the 70 weeks prophecy. It's so significant that Jesus himself actually pointed his disciples to this chapter as the key to understanding end-time prophecy. This isn't just general foresight. This is like calendar-level precision. It offers what seems like an irrefutable timeline.
Absolutely. This prophecy is specifically directed upon thy people, meaning the Jews, and upon the holy city, Jerusalem. It outlines a precise timeline for the consummation of 6 major objectives, demonstrating a comprehensive divine plan for Israel and Jerusalem that ties directly into the coming of the Messiah. These objectives include things like finishing transgression, making an end of sins, making reconciliation for iniquity, bringing in everlasting righteousness, sealing up vision and prophecy, and anointing the most holy place. And the fact that many of these objectives are not yet fully accomplished for Israel implies that the entire prophecy, particularly the final segment, hasn't concluded yet. It sets the stage for future events, demonstrating God's long-term unfolding plan.
Okay, so what did this specific part of the prophecy, the first 69 weeks, actually predict? And how astonishingly precise was it in its fulfillment?
Right. Daniel 9.25 states that, from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem unto the Messiah the King shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. That means 69 weeks of years, which adds up to 483 years in total. The term weeks here refers to weeks of years, or shabuim in Hebrew. It's a concept deeply familiar in ancient Jewish calendars, tied to cycles of 7 years, culminating in sabbatical years. In fact, Israel's 70-year captivity in Babylon, mentioned elsewhere in Daniel, was specifically linked to them owing God 70 sabbatical years they failed to observe over a 490-year period, emphasizing this week of years concept as a unit of prophetic time.
That's a remarkably long span of time to predict with such precision. How exactly did this prediction play out on the actual historical timeline?
It's incredibly precise, down to the very day, according to many calculations. The commandment to restore and build the city of Jerusalem, not just the temple, which was the focus of earlier decrees, but the city itself, was issued by Artaxerxes on March 14th of 445 BC. This specific decree is found right there in Nehemiah chapter 2. Then, history records that Jesus presented himself as the Messiah, the King, by deliberately arranging his triumphal entry into Jerusalem, riding on a humble donkey on April 6 of 32 AD.
The event we now call Palm Sunday.
Exactly. And this was a conscious public fulfillment of a prophecy from Zechariah 9.9, where it says, "Behold, your king is coming to you. He is just and endowed with salvation, humble and mounted on a donkey." Jesus had previously resisted attempts to make him king, but on this specific day, he orchestrated the event to fulfill this very prophecy, signifying his kingly claim in a very public way.
So what does this all mean when we do the actual historical and prophetic math? How do these dates align so perfectly? This is the mind-blowing part.
This is where the divine precision becomes truly undeniable for many who study this. If you calculate the exact number of days between March 14th, 445 BC and April 6th, 32 AD, now using a 360-day prophetic year, which is a common prophetic calculation based on certain ancient calendars where a year is 12 months of 30 days each, and you meticulously account for leap years, it comes out to precisely 173,880 days.
Okay, 173,880 days.
Right. And remarkably, 69 weeks of years, that is. 69 multiplied by 7 years, each with 360 days, also calculates to exactly 173,880 days. The margin of error appears to be 0. The angel Gabriel, according to the text, told Daniel the precise day the Messiah would present himself as king to Jerusalem, and it happened exactly as foretold. I mean, this is an astonishing, irrefutable demonstration of divine inspiration and precision for many. A powerful argument for the deity of Jesus Christ that's pretty hard to dismiss as mere coincidence, like God's unmistakable signature on history, a clear indicator that he means what he says and says what he means, with breathtaking accuracy in every detail of his divine plan.
Wow. That calendar-level precision makes Jesus' reaction during that triumphal entry even more poignant, doesn't it? He wasn't just writing into Jerusalem. He was writing into a city that had failed to recognize its day, its moment of divine visitation, foretold with such accuracy.
Absolutely. As Jesus beheld Jerusalem from the Mount of Olives overlooking the city, the text says he wept over it. He said, "If thou hadst known, even thou, at least in this thy day, the things which belong unto thy peace, but now they are hid from thine eyes." He wasn't merely expressing sadness, he was holding them accountable for their spiritual blindness, for not knowing the time of their visitation, for not recognizing the fulfillment of the very prophecies we're discussing, which had been laid out in such precise detail centuries earlier. And because they didn't, as he prophesied then, Jerusalem was utterly destroyed just 38 years later by the Romans in 70 AD, over 1 million inhabitants slaughtered, the temple completely leveled, a cataclysmic event in Jewish history. It underscores a profound and sobering lesson for all of us, I think. Knowing prophecy comes with a responsibility to understand and respond. When God reveals his plan with such precision, there seems to be an expectation for us to pay attention and act accordingly.
Okay, so we have 69 weeks fulfilled right down to the day, culminating in Jesus' triumphal entry, and then just 4 days later, his crucifixion. But the prophecy talks about 70 weeks. What happened to that final week? And what does this long interval we're seemingly mean for us today, especially regarding the enduring influence of those ancient empires we talked about?
Right. This is where we start to understand the larger divine timeline, often referred to by scholars as a prophetic gap or interval. Daniel 9.26 tells us that after the 62 weeks, meaning after the 69 weeks have concluded, shall the Messiah be cut off, but not for himself. This unequivocally points to Jesus' crucifixion, which happened just 4 days after that precise triumphal entry. He died not for his own sins, but for the sins of others. The verse continues, stating that the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary.
And that was fulfilled by the Romans.
Yes, unequivocally fulfilled in 70 AD by the Roman legions under Titus, leading to the catastrophic destruction of Jerusalem and its magnificent temple. So you have events happening immediately after the 69th week concludes, the Messiah being cut off, the city being destroyed, and then a significant, indeed vast gap before the final 70th week begins.
This raises a huge question. If the 69 weeks ended with the Messiah being cut off, and the 70th week hasn't happened yet, what's this vast period of time we've been in? It's over 2,000 years now. How do we account for this in the prophetic blueprint?
Well, this period is understood as an interval, a gap, between the 69th and 70th week, and yes, it has lasted for over 2 millennia now. This interval is implied in other scriptures too, forming what was considered a mystery previously hidden in the Old Testament. For example, remember when Jesus read from Isaiah 61 in the synagogue? He stopped reading mid-sentence, right at a comma, pointedly leaving out the phrase, "and the day of vengeance of our God."
Ah, I remember that passage.
Right. It turns out that comma has lasted for 2 millennia. That day of vengeance is associated with the events of the 70th week and his second coming, which are still future. The Apostle Paul reveals this interval as a mystery, what many theologians now refer to as the church age. During this time, God's primary focus shifted, in a sense, from a national program specifically with Israel to a global one through the church, which is described as neither Jew nor Gentile, but a new spiritual entity comprised of believers from every nation. The text says Israel was temporarily blinded until the fullness of the Gentiles come in, signifying the completion of the church's formation. This means God has a separate, ongoing program for Israel, which will resume after this current interval, demonstrating the intricate layers of God's plan.
So these ancient empires, though physically gone, their direct rule dissolved, they've still profoundly impacted our present. How do their legacies continue to affect us today, even within this long interval of the church age? What lasting imprints did they leave beyond just roads and language?
Oh, the influence is pervasive and truly enduring. It proves that history isn't just a sequence of forgotten events, but a living legacy, shaped, proponents would argue, by divine design. Take the Greek language, spread by Alexander's conquests. It became the universal language of the known world, and specifically the language of the New Testament. This facilitated the spread of ideas, philosophy, and crucially, the gospel across vast regions. It allowed the New Testament to be written and understood by a very broad audience. And beyond language, Greek philosophy, Plato, Aristotle profoundly influenced Western thought, science, even early Christian theology in complex ways. Concepts of democracy and civic life, though maybe imperfectly practiced, found roots in Greek city-states influencing later political systems.
And the Roman Empire's footprint is just undeniably immense, especially in terms of governance and infrastructure. You can still see it.
Oh, absolutely. The Roman Empire's legal structures, like Roman law, which codified rights, contracts, property, that became the very bedrock of modern Western jurisprudence and governance. Its administrative systems, its concepts of citizenship, and particularly its extensive road networks and the stable Pax Romana, Roman peace, these provided the very infrastructure and environment for disseminating Christianity. Those durable roads and the relative stability, originally built for military and administrative purposes, allowed apostles and early missionaries to travel quickly and safely to spread the gospel throughout the vast empire.
It's amazing how something built for conquest became a tool for spreading faith.
It really is. Think of how much of modern European law, governance, even city planning can trace their roots directly back to Rome's iron strength, and even the fragmented nature of the feat of iron and clay from the statue. It hints at the complex geopolitical landscape that still exists today. You see enduring powers grappling with internal weaknesses and divisions. Modern Europe, with its diverse nations and ongoing attempts at integration and sometimes fragmentation, can be seen as a continuation of this divided woman legacy. The prophecies of their rise and fall continue to affirm, for believers, the reliability of divine revelation, demonstrating that God is sovereign over human history and that his purposes weave through every era, leaving lasting imprints that affect us even now, subtly shaping our world in ways we often don't immediately recognize.
This leads us then to the final piece of Daniel's puzzle, the
Yeah.
70th week. The culmination of history as we know it and the establishment of an ultimate kingdom that will last forever. We've seen God's precise plan unfold in the past. Now we look to the grand finale. That is, according to this text, meticulously laid out as well.
Yes. Daniel 9.27 describes this climactic period. The he in this verse, referring back to the prince that shall come from Daniel 9.26 again, often interpreted by scholars as the future world ruler, the Antichrist will enforce a covenant or treaty with Israel for 1 week. That means 7 years. This covenant implies a period of false peace, maybe a strategic alliance, and possibly an opportunity for Israel to reestablish certain religious practices, likely including animal sacrifices, perhaps in a rebuilt Jewish temple in Jerusalem. However, it's ultimately presented as a deceptive agreement designed to serve the Antichrist's own agenda, which then unfolds with terrifying precision.
So what exactly happens during this final 7 years, especially in relation to this world leader and the Jewish people? It sounds ominous.
Well, this 7-year period is divided into 2 distinct halves. According to Daniel 9.27, in the middle of the 7-year period, so after 3.5 years, this world leader will break the treaty. He will cause the sacrifice and oblation to cease. This confirms the presence, at that future time, of a rebuilt Jewish temple where these sacrifices were reestablished. He will then set up the abomination of desolation, likely an idol, perhaps his own image, in the Holy of Holies of that rebuilt temple, demanding universal worship for himself, an act of ultimate blasphemy and desecration.
Echoing Antiochus Epiphanes, but on a global scale.
Exactly, just as Antiochus did centuries ago, but this time on a global, unprecedented scale. And this event, the setting up of the abomination of desolation, triggers what the Bible calls the Great Tribulation. This is the last half of that 7-year period, lasting precisely 3.5 years, or 1,260 days according to other prophecies. Jesus himself quoted Daniel 12 to describe this as a time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation, even to that same time, nor ever shall be, end quote. It's also called Jacob's trouble by the prophet Jeremiah, emphasizing its primary focus on the Jewish people. A period of unprecedented and intense severity designed, many believe, to bring Israel to a point of national repentance and finally recognition of their true Messiah. It's truly a terrifying yet purposeful time depicted in prophecy, leading directly to God's ultimate intervention.
But this terrifying period doesn't last forever, does it? The prophecy doesn't end there. How does the divine blueprint conclude? What is the ultimate glorious outcome for humanity?
No, thankfully it doesn't last forever. Remember the stone cut without hands that ultimately strikes and utterly destroys the statue of empires. That stone signifies God's eternal kingdom. This kingdom, ruled by Jesus Christ as king, will completely replace all earthly powers. It dismantles every human system that has ever existed. The prophecies culminate in Jesus' second coming, where he returns in power and glory not as the humble servant of his first coming, but as the conquering King of Kings. This is followed by the climactic battle of Armageddon, where all opposing forces gathered against him are decisively defeated. And immediately thereafter, according to this prophetic view, Jesus establishes his literal millennial reign on earth, ruling from a literal throne in Israel, bringing in an era of perfect peace, justice, and righteousness that will last for 1,000 years before leading into the eternal state.
So the prophecies ultimately point to a literal physical kingdom on earth ruled by Christ.
That's the understanding derived from a literal interpretation of these texts. It highlights God's unyielding commitment to his promises, particularly to Israel, a nation with a distinct destiny that runs right through the heart of these prophecies, proving his faithfulness. It affirms that God means what he says and says what he means, with astonishing precision in every single detail. Just as the earlier prophecies concerning the succession of empires and the exact timing of the first coming of the Messiah were fulfilled with absolute exactitude, so too this view holds will this final, ultimate kingdom be established, ushering in an era of divine rule. It is the glorious and unshakable culmination of God's perfect, preordained plan for history, a future that is presented as being as certain as the past fulfillments we've discussed.
Wow. What an incredible journey through history and prophecy we've taken, from Nebuchadnezzar's dream to Daniel's visions. We've really seen a divine blueprint unfold with, well, breathtaking accuracy, mapping out empires that rose and fell, shaping the world for the coming of the Messiah. It certainly seems clear that a divine hand orchestrated these events, setting the stage with unparalleled precision, proving his authorship of history, as you said.
Yeah, and we've seen how God, far from being silent during those intertestamental years, was meticulously preparing the stage. Through a universal language, strategic infrastructure, the preservation of his people, and the exact fulfillment of the 69 weeks of Daniel's prophecy, fulfilled arguably to the precise day of the Messiah's first arrival. That is just an irrefutable testament for many to divine foresight and power, truly demonstrating that God is the ultimate author of history and that every detail of his plan seems utterly certain.
And we've glimpsed the future described in these texts. A final period of intense global events culminating not in chaos ultimately, but in the establishment of God's eternal kingdom, ruled by Jesus Christ as King. His reign will be the last and everlasting empire, utterly replacing all human endeavors, bringing in an age of perfect righteousness.
Exactly. These ancient prophecies aren't just historical curiosities. They demonstrate God's absolute sovereignty over human history and his ongoing precise plan. They provide us with a compelling framework to understand not only the past, but also the present and the future, showing us that all things are moving towards a divinely appointed culmination under his perfect rule.
So here's something to think about. If God has been so incredibly precise in fulfilling these ancient prophecies, detailing the rise and fall of empires and even the exact day of the Messiah's first arrival, what does that precision tell you about the certainty of his promised ultimate kingdom? And how might that understanding change the way you view the world around you?